Welcome to episode 31 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. Brennan, from a different setting now. He moved across the country. He's coming live from Edmonton right now. So, Brennan, how was the move? It's been a little while since we talked. We had a little break there for you to get all settled and everything, and it's still obviously a work in progress. But how's that going? And have you been the last little while?
Yeah, it's been really good. It was 37 hours of driving, so it took 5 days. It was fairly exhausting, but definitely fun, and I'm loving it here in Edmonton. I mean, we're 2 hours behind, so it's only 9 in the morning for me, and we're recording at 11 Eastern, so it's been good, though. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to get my Sens tickets here to that lone game in Edmonton, and then hopefully make the drive to Calgary, too, but we'll see. And yeah, I mean, so far just exploring and doing different things, but yeah, we've had to unpack everything, so it's a lot of work moving. I'll tell you that. It's that's not overly fun, but once it's set up, that's the fun part, right? So yeah, we've missed. Technically, we skipped over 2 episodes there, and now we're gonna start resuming as normal. So that we do have some stuff to talk about today. I mean, it was kind of dry before we left, so we're gonna get into a few things today, and then do another team comparison, which has gotten a lot of heat and attention from other fan bases as well. Correct.
Yeah, the team comparisons have kind of been a good summer little project, and it's good because little teaser later in the episode we're gonna compare the Ottawa Senators to the Boston Bruins, and we wanted to do them earlier because obviously they were the cream of the crop in the NHL last year. They were the team to beat going into the playoffs anyway, and we wanted to wait just because we weren't sure about Bergeron and Krejci. Lo and behold, when we waited, both of them retire. So obviously that's going to be a good time to do a comparison because it's pretty set in stone what their lineup's going to be. So we'll get into all that. First and foremost, though, this is our first episode since hitting 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That was a huge goal we wanted to hit before training camp. We hit it with a month to spare, so we are taking off here. And just personally, I just want to say thank you to everyone who subscribed to the YouTube. And if you're listening on audio, you can go head over to YouTube. We obviously Brendan's got a nice new background now that he's just moved into. We keep our cameras on. It's more interactive, I think, on the YouTube. We go live over here, so you get notifications if we go live after a trade, big signing. We might do it after some games, before games, whatever it is this season. So head over to the YouTube page and hit the subscribe button. It goes a long way for us, and it's a good way to start building this thing. So we were very pleased, obviously, and I think these team comparisons that you talked about kind of maybe boosted that. And I mean, yeah, you said they were getting some hate, but like, I don't know if it's not bad hate. It's just it's other fan bases, and obviously like they're gonna get upset. It's obviously we're a Sens podcast. It was funny. It's just on Twitter. It doesn't matter. But so yeah, just if you want to touch on hitting 1,000 subscribers like well before our deadline. I think we probably got another like 500 in the last month and a half maybe or something like that. Like which is pretty crazy growth. So we're really impressed.
Yeah, we are, and yeah, definitely thank you to everyone. I mean, we've tweeted it out a few times, trying not to be too pushy with it, but at the same time, it is kind of meaningful, and it is like a testament to what we're doing, and I'm, it's something to be proud of. So, yeah, we said training camp. We originally started with the season, which was August or October 11th, and then we pushed it to training camp because it started to grow a bit faster, and that's the thing is once it starts growing, it starts to really grow like that. That's the thing with building accounts and stuff. So. Yeah, we do really appreciate it. It's been awesome so far. I know, like, we're not even just having the subscribers now, but we're actually getting the views. People are watching. Like, it's not just people blankly subbing. They're actually watching. We're averaging like 1,000 plus views per video. And I'm not even saying that to like brag. I'm just saying that as like thank you because it means a lot to be able to see that we're consistently keeping people interested. That's kind of our whole goal with what we're doing here. So yeah, and on top of that, it's been the off season, which I find is like what I really like about the whole 1,000 subs thing is that there hasn't been a single Sens game since we started our podcast. So we've basically been creating content and kind of covering, I know the live streams got a ton of views when like all that stuff happened earlier with the DeBrincat trade and all that, garnered a lot of interest. But yeah, I mean, people are very supportive. And it was awesome because like we were at 900 one day and then the next day it just like shot up and everybody kind of came in and got us to 1,000, which was awesome. So yeah, thank you to everyone. We appreciate it. And we want to just keep growing and keep this excitement going throughout the year. Because I think once the games start, we get a few live streams in. It was a great game. We get some player reactions and they're like, it'll be awesome. So yeah, thank you to everyone. And we're excited to keep building here.
It really is just a testament. Like you mentioned the off season, it's a testament to the Sens fan base. And I know that there's lots of Sens podcasts out there and it's awesome. There's so much content. And it's just great that there's so much stuff to consume in the off season when they're not doing anything. I think it's kind of funny because last summer all the moves were kind of bang, 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 and then it was nothing, right? It was Giroux, DeBrincat, like it was all kind of in a 2-3 week span. This one was kind of dragged out. It was they signed Korpisalo, week later trade DeBrincat, month or whatever, 3 weeks later signed Tarasenko. Like it was kind of spread out. So maybe that it helps in a way to kind of not saturate the talk about the offseason and just kind of you can spread out the excitement a little bit. But yeah, it's been great, and this was the plan, obviously, like we talked about. So enough about that. Let's get into our show today, episode 31. We are going to talk a little bit. We actually have some Sens stuff to talk about. The first, let's talk about the Sensplex skates, and I wanted to say that because last summer, huge thing was going to Bell Sensplex where they were practicing and taking pictures with all the new guys, with Giroux, with DeBrincat. And that season is kind of starting to ramp up again as players come in for the season. We'll start to see them roll in, I think, this week, next week, just get more, situated in Ottawa, kind of like last year. But Tarasenko's already here. I think Anton Forsberg was skating, which is a great sign that he's back on the ice and fine. And yeah, we've got a picture here of Tarasenko in the Sens jersey, helmet, and not the gloves yet. So that'll obviously come. He's got the Rangers gloves still, but it's exciting, man. I think this is probably my favorite part of the offseason is when all the new guys, the prospects like Tyler Kleven, Tyler Boucher, both out on the ice with those guys yesterday. Erik Karlsson, newest member of the Pittsburgh Penguins, was out there. So yeah, like I don't know if there's a question or like a topic to discuss about this, but it really, to me anyway, it just kind of shows how tight the Ottawa hockey community is, right? I believe, I'm sure Mason McTavish and Jack Quinn's injured, but like all those guys would be on the ice too. Like they all skate together, and it's pretty cool that there's so many guys who have roots in Ottawa.
It is, yeah, and it seems like it's more every year. Like I know Cody Cece's been a staple since Ottawa drafted him, and he's still there as well. And there's a handful of guys like that. I know Scott Sabrin too has been there, which is interesting. He signed with the Sharks, by the way. But what I'm really interested about is Anton Forsberg and him being there and actually taking part in what they're doing. And the fact is that he tore both of his MCLs, so to see him there, coming early, getting the work in, and that's a big thing for all of them is coming early. But Forsberg being back on the ice and kind of proving that he is healthy and ready to go, that's something that I think is really important because we've talked about it. Jonas Korpisalo signed a 5-year contract, mega deal, but at the same time, Anton Forsberg last year, like 2021-22, was next level good for Ottawa. So I think if he can come back and put in that work and get back to like 3/4 of that form, the tandem is going to be unreal, and people really, really severely underrate Forsberg in that tandem. So that's awesome. I put out on Twitter yesterday that I'm also very intrigued by Tyler Kleven and Tyler Boucher being there, because they're both putting in the work, and obviously they're turning pro. Like this is going to be their first pro year. Kleven played 8 games or something last year for Ottawa. But of course, both are expected to start in the AHL. But I think like if you wanted to try and be bold and push your way to a role with the Senators in the NHL, I think this is a way to do it. Is coming back early, showing the coaches, yeah, I'm going to come to Ottawa early before everybody else. I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to skate with Erik Karlsson. I'm going to skate with Vlad Tarasenko. Like we're going to get these scrims in. I don't know. I love the look of that. Especially for Kleven, he seems like he's so determined. Like every time I see Kleven out there and I hear him in an interview, he seems so determined to like make things happen and be a legitimate NHL player. So obviously, I mean, like I said, I think both Kleven and Boucher will start in the AHL, but I definitely expect to see both get games, and I think this is a great first step. And I put in my article yesterday, which was about training camp and storylines. I put like it only takes a few good days at training camp to wow the coaches enough to get a shot on the roster, right? And so if either of those guys can do it, I said like Boko Imama too. If they can do it, like you make an impression on the guys. And DJ Smith is very impressionable. He loves when players make a personal connection with them. So if you can do that at all in training camp or before, like they have a good shot, right? So I think, yeah, expect to see Kleven and Boucher play games, but this is awesome to see everybody skating at the Sensplex early.
It really is just a ramp up to the season. And I mean, training camp will be great because we can break down like, the minute details of preseason games and the battles and in the depth pairings and the depth lines and forwards and stuff like that. So on that note, a little bit though, on the lines and everything like that, you put out I don't want to say a mock roster, kind of the depth chart. You put out the depth chart, you tweeted it out and put a poll on if it's a playoff team or not. And it was a resounding yes. Obviously we're Sens fans. We love the Ottawa Senators. We're not going to, say no, but to me, I think that number was a little bit surprising, to be honest, because I think, I don't know how many votes it got, but
Just
I'm
under
sure it was
3,000 votes.
so just under 3,000 people who obviously followed the Everyday Sens account and are Sens fans if they do that. But maybe there were some that aren't, and that could be the no. But it's telling. I think it's telling about what this fan base expects. And you said it right. It's playoffs or bust according to the fan base, according to the majority of the fan base. So on that note, like I don't know. I think this buildup is going to be different because last year it was. I keep mentioning last year because I think we're going to see some similarities in when when Giroux comes back or starts skating. Sorry, when Kubalik gets here, when Korpisalo gets here, we're going to see all this fanfare. Get to know the new guys. It's going to be really similar to last year, but the difference this time is that the core guys, Kachuk, Stützle, Shabbat, they have last year under their belt, so they know what these high expectations can do. Early in a year, and Kachuk even mentioned that. So I'm really curious to see how the players react to it, the fan base, and I mentioned, a couple days ago, and obviously on Twitter, pre-sale for the home opener weekend because it's a back-to-back at home on the weekend, which is a great way to open the season at the Canadian Tire Center. I'm going to be there with Derek Lee, actually, from the Future Sickos podcast. We're going to go together for both games, so it's going to be an awesome, awesome opening weekend. That'll be game 2 and 3 for the Sens. I'm just really curious to see if they can ride the hype as long as, I don't want to say as long as they did last year because it did fall off, but they were good in October. I think they were 4-2 in October or something like that. So I'm not really going anywhere with this, but I think that fan vote is very accurate of what we expect. It's not like hopeful, and I know other fan bases are going to say that, but that's sports. Who cares? You're going to trash on other fan bases, but I think legitimately this is the peak of the rebuild in the sense that now expectations start, and now you got to hold players accountable. If Brady Tkachuk goes out and has a bad game, fans are going to hold him accountable because they need to win hockey games. So what was your take on just seeing that discrepancy? Because that was the biggest thing I noticed for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot of Sens fans, but at the same time, like, it's warranted. I don't think that it's even just being hopeful. I think that, and yes, other fan bases will tell you that, but I think that, like, it just is the expectation, and that goes to show you, that's my take from it, is not like that's going to influence them to make the playoffs or anything. It's just that is what people expect, is that lineup that I posted, which is basically the lineup we've been saying on, every comparison, and we'll get into later, that lineup is going to be good enough to make the playoffs in some capacity. So I think that it was like 87.4% yes or something for it being a playoff lineup. And again, yeah, it relates to like how it looks on paper, but I think moreover, it's just people expecting the team to do that. And I don't think there's a single Sens fan out there right now who would tell you they don't expect the playoffs this year. Not that I've seen, maybe a few, but like if we're not expecting the playoffs after 6 years of rebuilding, I don't know what we're even doing here. So I mean, I kind of expected it last year. So if they can stay healthy, I don't think there's any excuse to miss. That's kind of my take on it. And yeah, I think that poll was just kind of a good representation of what people expect as fans. So yeah, I don't really have anything else on that, just because, that's really my only takeaway, is that people are ready for the next step here, and that there's not going to be any more nonsense like after a terrible 5-0 loss to Chicago where everybody was cheating. People are going to be angry, and it's not just going to be like angry. They're going to be calling people, players, coaches, they're going to be calling them out, right? Like Michael Andlauer is going to be forced into making dramatic changes if this team starts like 5-10 or something. You know what I mean? So I think it's going to be interesting to watch. And I think that if things do go into like a dumpster fire state unexpectedly, it'll be kind of interesting to see how fast Michael Andlauer is going to step in and be like, all right, I gave you guys a shot. This is it. I'm replacing you. I'm taking over and really taking the reins. So we'll see, but it'll be interesting. And I thought this poll was a good showing of that.
I'm glad you mentioned Andlauer too, because it just reminded me earlier this week, Bruce Garriock reports that he's going to be taking over early September, which was the expectation, but it's kind of in writing now, whatever. They're just shoring everything up, and that's exciting because that's right before training camp. I believe training camp opens September 16th, 15th, 17th, like around there. It's like middle of September, a little later in September maybe, but yeah, it's exciting because, yeah, like we said, the expectation will be different, and it's not assuming that Andlauer is going to be some hardo who like the Vegas Golden Knights. It's not expecting that he'll be like I think it's Bill Foley in Vegas, who's just cutthroat and has had 3 coaches in 6 years, and they just won a cup. Like they've been very successful under that model. Not that Andlauer is going to be like that, but we can expect that he'll be a little less lenient than the past 4 or 5 years have been, where you go in and I don't want to say the team was expecting to compete, but the message to the fans was that we are not rebuilding anymore. That was 2 years ago, and they still made the playoffs. So that kind of stuff I don't think will fly under a new ownership, and I think that's a fair expectation too. So it's exciting that he's picking up the reins early before the season starts. So there won't be any, leeway. It'll be, because he can go in and address the training camp. I think that's the biggest thing, right? It's. I think Melnick did it every year, but you go in and just talk to the first tryout and just say like, oh, okay, we're here, we're expecting this, blah blah blah. I think that'll be good. I think that'd be great, and it'll be a great video if there's cameras there and stuff like that. So really exciting. Alfredsson's also coming back in the role, and it seems like it'll be a player development role. I gotta be honest. I'm a little, if it's just player development, and I'm not knocking, like Sean Donovan or Jesse Winchester, or Wade Redden now even. It's great, and you need former players to be doing that because they know the city, they know how to become a pro here, all of that. I feel like if Alfie is just the head of player development, personally, I'd be a little bit disappointed. I don't know about you, but I want him to be in a more face of the franchise kind of role. And I know some people will say he can't be president of hockey operations because he doesn't have any experience, and that's valid. Like that's completely fair. But like Jason Spezza, I think was special assistant in Toronto. Like I feel like he could do something like that. And maybe he doesn't want to. Maybe he just wants to be a player development guy and just get to know the players on that kind of level. But what's your take? Because I think that's what Bruce said. It's expected it'll be a player development role, and or maybe a significant player development role. I can't really remember the wording, but it wasn't a front office position kind of thing. So what was your take just on that part of the report?
Yeah, I mean, I think Spets is a good kind of comparison as to what we were more expecting, but at the same time, Alfie has a ton of like you said, it depends on what he wants to do, right? He's not going to put himself in a situation where he's just going to want to leave again pretty quickly. Like he's been working a lot with the players, is what we've seen over the last few years. Like he went to lunch with Brady Tkachuk not that long ago. I mean, or at that a few years ago even. I don't even know. It feels like it was recent, but he's been on the ice like skating. I know players have even talked about him coming out there and skating with them, and like how good of a role model he's been for them. And obviously like he's a face for Ottawa and for the Sens and a great representation of the city, and that's awesome for new players especially too, to be able to kind of get that. But I think just on the ice as a player, he can give them so much. I do agree with you in the sense that we don't hear a lot about the player development coaches, so that's kind of underwhelming about Alfie, right? Like for Sean Donovan and Jesse Winchester and all them, we haven't really, I mean, Redden got quite a bit of hype at the beginning, but we haven't really heard about a lot of what they're doing, so it's kind of under the radar. Whereas if he's in a Spezza type role, Alfie would be more like on the TV during games and like out there, and people would really know him and see him all the time, which would be sweet. But I think, like I said, I just think that he probably wants to do more of the player development stuff based on what he's done in the past. I don't know if he's ever talked about like a management type role, but I know that he has spent a lot of time with the players and developing them. And I'm sure that seeing Redden's impact too, and obviously they've known each other for a long time, I'm sure that also kind of pushed him towards like, okay, I think I could make a real difference with these players. And I'm not going to complain if Daniel Alfredsson's out there on the ice with some of our young players coming up. I think he could give guys like Drake Batherson a ton of information about how to play certain ways that they might not be right now. So yeah, I mean, either way, I think having Alfie back, we'll take it. We'll be happy. And who knows, right? In the future, maybe he starts there and he decides, hey, I'd like to try something else. I'm sure that Michael Andlauer's not going to, slap Alfie in the face and tell him you're not allowed to do this. Like he's going to be able to promote him if he wants to do that, I'm sure. So I think for now, I'll just be happy with Alfie coming back in any capacity. And then, hopefully the team will produce content around him a little bit too, to kind of push that narrative of him being back in the organization and not just let him kind of go under the radar like some of the player development coaches do. But either way, yeah, he's going to be out there with our players, and that's a pretty notable feat in my mind.
So actually, that's on me, because I think when I hear player development, I'm thinking, because what Winchester and Redden and Donovan do, I could be completely off here. I don't know how closely they work with like Kachuk and Batherson and all them. I think it's more
Prospects,
like stuff like now in the summer, like with Boucher and Clevin, like with the actual prospects. So if Alfie's doing that, like I do want him hands on with the players, and maybe a management role he wouldn't be able to do that. So that makes sense then. You almost want him as like an assistant coach kind of, right? Like you want him to be not the brunt of criticism, because like we talked about it earlier in the summer. Like would you want him as a head coach, and short term maybe, but like head coaches die, and not obviously literally, but they don't have long lifespans most of the time in markets, because people get sour, they lose, team loses, that's sports. So we can move off of that. let's move into the Boston Bruins. This is going to be a fun one again. We've done the Florida Panthers. If you want to check out episode 30, and then episode 29 was the I'm blanking. Who did we compare them to? The Buffalo Sabres. There we go. So two teams the Sens were very close to in the standings last year. Actually, this one not so much. It was a very big difference. Now the Bruins have gotten worse this offseason. I don't think that's up for debate. I think any Bruins fan would tell you that too. They not only lost their first line center and franchise star in Patrice Bergeron, and captain, they also lost their second line center and also a franchise legend, David Krejci. And then they also lost Taylor Hall. They traded him to Chicago in a move that I guess was for cap reasons because even after all these losses, they are still cap strapped right now. They can't really do anything else. So before we even pull up the lineup sheet, I know I've seen as soon as the two centermen retired, I know that people were linking Mark Scheifele to Boston, and just that if he's on the market with Winnipeg, that could be maybe a midseason thing. I don't know, but as it stands right now, we are going to, August 18th, we are comparing the Sens roster to the current Bruins depth chart. This is gonna be a fun one because last summer the Bruins were the team everyone said, oh, you know what, maybe they'll fall off. No way they can make the playoffs again. Then they turn around and have the best season in NHL history, like regular season, which was kind of funny. But I think this year there's actually valid reason to think they will fall off. So without further ado, let's pull it up and let's talk about the Boston Bruins compared to the Ottawa Senators. So if you can start here with this top line.
For sure. So I want to change this a little bit because I know that like Marchand, like this top line that's on here is Marchand, Coyle, and Pasternak. But their actual lineup, I think, is based on what I've seen, is more like Van Riemsdyk, Zacha, and Pasternak, which is like, I mean, again, we're doing lines, but we're kind of more doing tiers in a way. So like if we look at, we can do it based on the depth chart here, just because that's what we have up. So we'll do Marchand, Coyle, and Pasternak, and I think for Ottawa, like we've got Tkachuk, Stützle, and Tarasenko is kind of like their first line, right? I mean, that's the expectation is going to be. So I think Boston's first line is the one part where you're gonna have a bit of trouble kind of combating them because Marchand and Pasternak are these two absolute powerhouse dogs of the league, and everybody knows that. I think that you see those two names, and of course, I want to preface this by saying that I do agree with a lot of people in the sense that losing Bergeron and Krejci is like ridiculously big for this. I don't know why people are looking past that. I mean, we're talking about not just like two amazing players and lights the heart of the team in Bergeron, but your top two centers. Like that center's a critical position, and you've just lost both of yours in one summer. Like that's crazy. That is crazy. I know Boston keeps defying the odds of age, but like my goodness, I just don't know how they can keep going with losing players like that. But regardless, they still have Marchand and Pasternak, who are obviously, like I said, two major players. I was a little bit surprised to see that Marchand was less than a point per game last year, actually. But Boston, I don't know. Boston to me was very strange. I was like blown away that they managed to set that record and that they were so good. I think a lot of that has to do with what we'll get to later, which is down the list, maybe not the forwards as much, but yeah, we'll start. I mean, if we're talking lines, Marchand, Coyle, Pasternak versus Tkachuk, Stützle, and we'll say Tarasenko, like it's tough because Pasternak is the best player there. It's like Matthew Tkachuk for Florida. I think he right now like 61 goals last year. I think he is far and away the best player on that list, which then you could kind of say like, yeah, I would take Boston's full top line over Ottawa's just because you get Pasternak, which is like this ridiculous player, right? Obviously, Stützle's going to be taking over Coyle. Coyle's certainly not a first-line center. He's probably a third-line center who's just bumped up, and you can switch him with Zacha there if you want. But regardless, I mean, he's going to be a top-6 center for them next year, so like that's kind of not good for them. And then Marchand, of course, is still your little rat that everybody hates, and he's maybe falling off a little bit with production as we're seeing. He's 35 now, which is, you can expect him. He's kind of around that Giroux age, but if we're comparing him to Tkachuk, I mean, I would take Brady because Brady is like a better Marchand at this point, and he's in his prime. So yeah, for me, I think Pasternak, we can go tiers. Pasternak, number one by far, and then you would probably put Marchand, Tkachuk, Stützle, and then maybe you could put Tarasenko, and then I'd put Coyle another tier down from Tarasenko. So I think Ottawa has kind of the edge with the 6 players that we're comparing here, but I think that Pasternak being far and away the best player right now also gives Boston that kind of you could say you'd take the Boston's group just because of Pasternak. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think Pasternak's one of those guys who kind of trumps everything, if that makes sense, right? I think it was like Barkov and Kachuk with the Panthers, and we'll admit that. Obviously, it's not an admission. I think it's just a fact. Like Pasternak had an unbelievable season last year. He was a Hart candidate, or finalist, I think. And you know what? I'm actually looking at this cap friendly thing, and obviously it's cap friendly, so the cap hit matters. I believe the depth chart is organized by position and how much they make. If I'm looking at that, because Charlie Coyle, I don't think is better than Zaka. Like I think Zaka is going to be their top center, but he makes less. So I think that's how they're organizing it. And listen, but that doesn't really change anything. Like Pavel Zaka is a good player. He's probably a second line center at his peak. He had a great kind of career revival, I would say, last year in Boston. But yeah, I think that I'm getting the gist of it now. But I think that's fair though, because I think the Sens, you could do the same thing. I think it would just bump down Tarasenko and put Giroux there, and then those are your, or I guess no, yeah, that would make sense. So anyway, I think you're right. I think it's tough. The difference with the Bruins though versus other teams when we're talking about this depth chart, and you can, like the Panthers were a big, I don't want to say culprit, but they were big on the fact that their third line had guys who played on the first line in the playoffs. Like they move things around a lot. With this Bruins lineup, I don't, other than Jake DeBrusk, there's no one else who I could see being in that top line spot. You know what I mean? Like, and he won't be because he's not better than Marchand or Pasternak. So it's one of those things where, yeah, the top line might not be exactly that, but it doesn't matter because none of the guys below them are going to move the needle to the point where it's that much better than the Sens top line. So as a line, I think I'd still take the Sens. But you're right. Pasternak is the best player there for sure. Marchand, Kachuk, Stützle probably in the same tier than Tarasenko, and then Zaka, Coyle, whatever you want to say. So that's the top line. I believe the next three lines we're going to do here, I think I know who we're taking. But I'll just start with the second line here. Let's just say Zaka / Coyle, whatever, over Josh Norris. I'm taking Norris if he's healthy, obviously. We're going to keep saying that every lineup comparison, but if Josh Norris is healthy, he's proved he can be a number one center in the NHL. So that's value right there. I think that's worthy enough to take him or even just take this line. I like Trent Frederick a lot. He's not a second line player though. So I'm taking Batherson over him or whoever it is. Also, we should have mentioned, I don't know if it came out, but I think it was Steve Warren, the Hockey News. I think he did an interview with Batherson and he said he'd be open to playing the left wing in lieu of Tarasenko playing right. So that's kind of something to consider. I think that's good to know because we were not struggling, but had that in mind, being Batherson's right wing, whatever.
Well, they said for one, I don't remember who said it. It might have been Steve Warren as well, but they said that Giroux and Batherson had both already offered to play left wing. So that's why I kind of put Tarasenko on the first line, is because I think that everybody's kind of accepting that's how it's going to be, and one of them is going to have to move over.
Yeah, well, I think Giroux's done it in his career before. I think he did it in Philly a lot when he moved to the wing.
His best season was on left wing.
Well, there you go. Yeah, he had 100 points when he was a left winger, so that's good. But yeah, Batherson would obviously be the first time in his career. So anyway, regardless, I'm taking Ottawa's second line in a heartbeat. I'm taking Batherson, Norris, and Giroux over DeBrusk, Zaka, and Frederick. I don't think that's crazy to say. Bruins fans might disagree. I like Pavel Zaka. I think he had a great year. I'm skeptical of him playing in such a top role because, listen, the other thing, it's one thing to say, oh, they're not as good as Bergeron, or not as good as Krejci. It's not just that, it's taking the matchups away from, like Pavel Zacha is going to have to go up against Austin Matthews. Like that's your matchup. And I don't know if as a Bruins fan, you can honestly tell me like you're confident in that. And I could be off base. Maybe they did match up their third line against Matthews when they played, but it's just an example. Like they had so much depth and it's gone now because their two top centers are gone. It's kind of a disaster when you think about it, right? It's like, imagine if tomorrow Stützle and Norris just retired, like how exactly. Yeah. Like you can still be bullish on Pinto and like what he brings. And Zaka's like decent, like right in his prime too. He's a great player, but he's not a superstar franchise center. So that alone, I'm taking the Sens second line in a heartbeat over the Bruins.
Me too. I mean, like our second line in this case would be Giroux, Norris, and Batherson. And I mean, I think all three of those players have the edge on Boston's. Like Trent Frederick, like you said, he's being thrown into a greater role than he should be just because they don't have the depth. Like they don't have the players to do it. I mean, if you want to say like Van Riemsdyk can be up there, well, he's got less production than Frederick last year. Like he's old. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, but Boston, like the thing that stands out about them, and this is what I said off the top, is you can't just lose your first and second line center and then have depth. Like it just doesn't work that way. I mean, if they went out and traded for a Scheifele or somebody, maybe, but in this case, you look at the lineup and your top six centers like Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle. I mean, both of those guys would probably be best served, you know, in the middle six, and Coyle, I'd say, on the third line. Zacha, like you said, he had a little revival year there. Who knows if he sustains that, for one, but I think your point was great that now he's got to go into that first line role. Like he had the luxury of playing behind Bergeron and Krejci last year, right? So he was able to kind of, it's like Pinto. I like that comparison. Zacha's ahead of him right now, obviously, but I like the comparison for roles just because Pinto kind of got thrust into that second line role. Like I think it would have been similar where if he had the luxury of playing on the third line, he would have done even better than he did last year. And I think that we can expect that next year, is now he's got, you know, the depth in front of him to allow him to focus on his individual game like Zacha was able to behind Bergeron and Krejci. Now they're going to tell Zacha, well, we need you to do a whole lot more than you did last year. Even though you put up almost 60 points, we now need you to take over the defensive responsibilities. We need you to do, you know, these crazy matchups against the best centers in the league. You got to play Connor McDavid. You got to face Austin Matthews. You got to face, guess who? Tim Stützle. That's what they're going to be saying. So, yeah, I mean, I think Zacha, good player, but in a greater role than he should be. And that kind of is Boston's entire forward corps, to be honest with you, aside from Pasternak and Marchand, like DeBrusque too, I guess, but they're kind of all being thrust into greater roles because they just don't have the top heavy star power anymore, which is forcing other guys to step up. So definitely taking, and you could make it Tarasenko, whoever you want. I'm taking Ottawa's second line of Giroux, Norris, and Batherson over Frederick, Zacha / Coyle, and DeBrusque. I mean, to me, it's just a pretty clear choice, and we can move on to the third line there for you.
Yeah, so this one again, I like Morgan Geekie. I do. I'm still taking Pinto over him. I think he had a good year in Seattle, but again, I when Daniel Sprong wasn't qualified as an RFA, there was a lot of talk. Oh, the Sens should get him, and he's a good player. Don't get me wrong, but personally, and it's just a personal bias, Seattle was such a perfect team last year. Like every forward they had produced like a middle six winger. So to me, I don't want to say it's a red flag, but I would be wary of just plucking one guy from that system and then putting him on my lineup and saying, okay, do it again, you know? So I don't know. I mean, maybe his production will go up. He plays more minutes and stuff, but that again, though, like 9 goals, 19 assists in 69 games last year for Geeky, that's not crazy for a guy on Seattle. That's kind of fourth line, third line ish numbers, right? Which again, numbers can be arbitrary. It depends on your team, whatever ice time. But I'm taking Pinto over Morgan Geekie. I think that's fair. And Van Riemsdyk, again, I do like him still. He's older. I'm not sure what he's got left to give in terms, because he plays that, you know, I don't want to say power forward, but he's a big body in front of the net, and he's 34. Like that's the kind of game that takes a toll on you. And he was on some bad Philadelphia teams the last couple of years, so maybe that kind of skews his stats a little bit. I could see him having success, you know, power play wise in Boston. He could honestly be a guy where if he finds something, he's a candidate to move up the lineup, right? He's a guy to replace Trent Frederick. So maybe that'll be what it is at the end of the day. But I mean, Jacob Lauko, he's by far obviously the youngest player in their forward group. I think it's Loco. I don't really know how to pronounce it there, but I'm taking Ottawa's third line. I'm taking Kubalik, Pinto, and Greg, Joseph. I won't be Joseph, but yeah, like one of those guys. I'm taking that whole line over the Bruins one again. And I mean, it's 2 new guys for Boston, which is, again, you kind of don't really know, but it's 2 new guys who weren't overly impressive on the teams they were on last year, right? So that's kind of my stance. And I'm just going to save myself some time because I don't want to go over the fourth line too much. I'm also taking Ottawa's fourth line. Given Patrick Brown was in Ottawa, I think that's fair. Lucic, I don't know what else he has left to give. I'm still taking Ottawa's fourth line over Boston. So bottom 6, I'm taking Ottawa.
I mean, I don't know, like after seeing some of the replies from other fan bases to this series, I almost purposely am making my brain like try to be non-biased by like being like, oh yeah, I really like that one player. I really like James Van Riemsdyk, just to make it like more even, because I feel like I'm being biased, just completely favoring Ottawa. But in this case, like I don't know how you can't. I don't know how you can look at this bottom 6. Maybe Boston fans come in and they say, well, Van Riemsdyk or Frederick or whoever's there, Like the Ridley Gregg's not a proven player, so I would take them over him. Okay, fine, whatever, doesn't matter. Ottawa still has the edge with like the other 5 players in the bottom 6. I mean, we're talking like Van Riemsdyk, Geeky, Lauko, Lucic, Patrick Brown, and AJ Greer. I mean, these guys are almost all fourth line players at this point, and some of them are fringe NHL players. Patrick Brown didn't even have a consistent role in Ottawa's terrible bottom 6 last year. So I mean, for me, yeah, like we're gonna go with Ottawa, where it's Greg, Pinto, Kubalik, and then unknown on the left wing, a prospect, Yuri Schmeichel, somebody, Mark Kastelik, and kind of an unknown on the right wing as well, McEwen or Parker Kelly or a prospect. So Ottawa's fourth line, again, we don't really know how it's going to shake out. There's various different ways it could. Maybe Boston's fourth line is better just because Ottawa has like if it's Parker Kelly, Mark Kastelik, and Zach McEwen, I might favor Boston a little bit just because I'm not huge on that trio. But regardless, I think that's kind of minor, and we're going to be taking Ottawa's bottom 6 as a whole in any case, right? So I think it's going to get more interesting here for Ottawa and Boston on the defense and in the goalies, because that's where Boston, they might be one of the only teams who could really stack up to Ottawa's defense on paper, I think. So for the forwards, I think we're both in agreement and are completely non-biased take. We absolutely favor Ottawa, and I think that I'm going to be bold here and say I think that all the fans and then the Leaf fans and everybody who inserts themselves into the replies, they can even agree that Ottawa's forward core is better than Boston's. I mean, I look at this group and they have no depth in Boston. If one of those top guys has an injury, they're absolutely screwed. Like they have nobody, very little star power, but also very little depth. I think Ottawa has star power and depth aside from their fourth line right now. So yeah, full on forward core, Ottawa wins that group, but I'm not going to discount Boston entirely because their strengths lie below, which I'll move down to. If you want to start on the defense, you can hit on, if you want to do the top 4 again, little top 4 comparison, and then we'll get into the other stuff.
Yeah, so this is the thing with the Bruins, right? We're really going to see this year, I think, because, we mentioned obviously the depth for the forwards took a massive hit this summer. The defense kind of stayed the same. I think they added obviously Kevin Shattenkirk. I don't know who they lost. They lost Connor Clifton, so kind of replaced same kind of player. I think Clifton plays with a little bit of bite, but Shattenkirk's a great player too, like just for a depth offensive defenseman, let's say. Yeah, look, this is where it gets interesting because I think that top 4 for the Bruins, and look, Charlie McAvoy is the best defenseman on either team. Same situation to me as Dahlin in Boston that we had. Lindholm had a great year last year. I just it's hard because we haven't really seen Ottawa's top 4 in at least a 20-game stretch play like that. We know Chychrun's a great player. Obviously, Shabbat has the talent. Sanderson and Zoo will work well for sure. I'm going to take Boston's top 4, and just because it's worked. And I think that's a fair stance or point to take. Like Grzelcyk and Brandstrom are probably not that far apart when you think about it, but in terms of the lineup and how they're working, like, I don't know, man. Like it is close though. You're right. And I do think that it's because it's so close. I'm just going to take Boston's because McAvoy is the best player. And I don't think that's crazy to say. That being said, there's still more star power in Ottawa's top 4 than there is in Boston's. I think Lindholm runs the power play for the Bruins. The Sens have 3 guys who can do that. They've got Sanderson killing penalty. Like they've got the potential. And obviously, again, I keep mentioning every episode, Jake Sanderson's the X factor. So if he pops off next season and becomes some Norris candidate out of the blue and gets on par with Charlie McAvoy, then it's a different conversation. But right now, I'm taking Boston's top 4, and I'll just skip ahead to the bottom pair quick. I'm going to take Ottawa's because I really believe in Eric Brandstrom, obviously. And I think I'm looking at some of these contracts too. How is Derek Forbert making $3 million? Like, what are they doing? I think that's actually kind of shocking to me. I'm not going to lie. You look at the cap hits on this blue line. Like every player that the Sens have is cheaper except Carlo and Grzelcyk, but I guess Sanderson, like that's actually kind of shocking to me. And I know it makes sense. They're different stages of their career and all that, but yeah, I can see why this team is up against the cap. This is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. And I think you're right with the whole it's work thing. And that's kind of a big part of why people come into the comments when we post mock lineups and stuff about Ottawa is that they haven't proven anything yet. And their top 4 on paper, full of stars, I think one awesome thing for Ottawa is that you said McAvoy's the best player right now. Absolutely. I think they just need one, and I think all three are capable. They need one of Chabot, Chikrin, or Sanderson to elevate to that level. And I think that all three are extremely capable of doing that. And as long as one of them does and kind of emerges as, because right now I'd say that Chabot and Chikrin are kind of top 30 defensemen. That's how I'd label them. And then Sanderson, obviously, he was a rookie, so it's hard to kind of peg where he is. But those two being top 30, like if one of them can jump into top 15 next year, that's huge, right? And then Sanderson comes up to be top 30 and it just keeps climbing, something like that. Having three defensemen who are at that level is huge. I think if we do the tiers again for this, you've got McAvoy, number one, and then you go down, you've got Chabot, Chikrin, Sanderson, and Lindholm, and then you've got, and I actually really like Brandon Carlo, but then you've got Carlo, Zub, Grzelcyk, and yeah, so I think that Ottawa has, like, it's kind of similar to Buffalo, where Ottawa has three players in that second tier in my mind, and Boston has one, but then Boston has the only player in the top tier. So like Dahlin, you can almost say, and you could see people saying, well, McAvoy kind of plays that trump card, as you mentioned, with Pasternak up front, where you could almost argue you'd take Boston's top four just because they have McAvoy, who pushes you to the next level, despite Ottawa having a little more depth and star power, if that makes any sense. Like, you know what I mean? They have three guys in that second tier, and I'd say they have three guys who are above Boston's guys, but then McAvoy's above them, which makes it kind of complicated. I'm going to agree with you that I'd take Boston's top four because we've seen it, but at the same time, I think that Ottawa's potential on defense is significantly higher than Boston's, and I think that, as I mentioned, if one of, Chikrin, Chabot, or Sanderson can elevate to be a top 15 defenseman per se, I think that I would take Ottawa's in that event, but we need to see it. We need to see Chikrin stay healthy for more than half the year. We need to see, Sanderson take another step, even though he was so good, but really, sustain his performance, be consistent. And then, the bottom pairing, I'll take Ottawa's too, because I love Eric Brandstrom. And similar to that, I love Brandstrom's potential. I think that he could very well price himself out of their range this year. I think he could solidify himself as an everyday NHLer, and somebody will give him a top 4 role next year. That's kind of how I feel about him, or they'll trade him or whatever will happen. But I think Boston will take their defense for now because it's worked, because they just set the all-time record for wins and whatever it was. It's hard to kind of bypass them in that case, but Ottawa's potential is higher in my mind.
Yeah, that's fair. And you can make the argument that Boston's D-core reached their potential last year because they had the best season in NHL history. Like, I don't want to skip over that because it was a fantastic year. It was a perfect season for Boston, but then they just choked in the playoffs. But like that's reasonable to say that Ottawa's potential is higher given that Boston just hit their potential. So you have to assume they're going to drop off from that. Like, this will not be a 65 win team next season. There's no way. And if they are, I'd be even more shocked. But that being said, goaltending. Let's move to goaltending. I'm going to take Boston's goaltending again. Like, I think, and I don't know, the more we talk about this, obviously, I said this for the last teams, you get more of a sense of what the teams are like, their depth charts. It is closer than people might make it out to seem. And I think that's what's important. And it's not that, saying Boston's going to fall out of the playoffs and Ottawa's going to make it. That's not saying Boston's a bad team or that Ottawa's overall a better team. It's just that again, kind of like Buffalo a little bit, everything went well for Boston last season. They had a perfect year. Like, Ullmark played out of his mind. He had a historic season. That won't happen again, right? Like, that can't be expected to happen again. So I'm curious to see how the goaltending holds up. Like, if they stay healthy, if this goes according to play. Like, look, quick math: 49 plus 37. Like, how many games did a backup goalie play there, right? Whereas Ottawa had 7 different goalies play for them. So if you can get those kind of numbers from Forsberg and Korpisalo, regardless of what their save percentage is, just the consistency alone will go a long way for Ottawa. So I think that can be a model there for the Sens of Ottawa. But right now, just based on last year, you have to take the best goalie tandem in the league. I think it'd be kind of crazy to not take that.
No, I'm definitely taking Ottawa. No, I'm just kidding. No, I would definitely take Boston. I mean, you've got Ullmark, but I think, as you said, it's notable that he only, like, a 938 save percentage is completely ridiculous. I didn't even know it was that good. Obviously won the Vezina, and Swayman too, 920. Oh my God, I just keep seeing these things and it makes my eyes pop. I just think that, like you said,
look at their records. That's insanity.
40-6 and 24-6. 40-6. Like that is wild. But like you said, I mean, the funny thing about Allmark is he wasn't really that good before coming to Boston. Like it's weird. I guess their defense did wonders too and stuff, but he definitely deserves credit. I mean, he won the Vezina. I just think that it's going to be hard for them to repeat that. And I also think that having Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci is critical. Like centers play a huge defensive role in the team. And now you're asking Zach and Coyle to step into top six roles. Like Boston's defensive game as a whole, not their defense, but their defensive game should be expected to regress because they're losing, the consistent Selke winner in Bergeron, who is like, that's a massive deal, by the way. And then Krejci too, who is a great two-way guy. Their defensive game as a whole should definitely regress, and that's going to hurt their goalies. That's just how hockey works. Like if you have a great defensive team, obviously you're like Allmark and Swayman had fantastic individual years, but it's going to help you if you have one of the best defenses in the league in front of you, right, as a whole. So I think that can be expected to hurt them. I also think that it's just seeing those numbers, it's so hard to repeat something like that. And Boston as a team too, where they set the win record, it's so hard to repeat something like that. You've said it. Everything has to go perfectly. You need to not suffer injuries. You need to exceed expectations and get the bounces. And like it's kind of the opposite of Ottawa, right? I mean, they had the terrible luck where their expected goals was so much higher than their actual goals. It was like the opposite for Boston. So I think you're taking Boston's goalies. Everybody 100% should be on board with that. I don't think there's any argument, but I just think it's notable that, they shouldn't be expected to post these same numbers. And I think the Boston's defensive game will regress as their whole team will, because it's just natural. Like they've been good forever. They what was that, 2011 where they went to the cup, they won the cup. Like it's been forever that they've been competing. So I think at some point, and we said it last year, yes, but I think now this year, this is more serious because they lost their top six centers. They have to be expected to regress. Like they can't keep doing this. However, I will say, and I'll ask you, we're going to keep asking this question. Do you think they're a playoff team next year?
Yeah, but there's more than 8 playoff teams in the East. So that's fair to say too. I think this team could still make the playoffs. I just don't think they'll be as good as they were last year. A couple things though too. So you mentioned the Bruins won in 2011. They've had more than a decade of just unbelievable success. So they won the cup in 2011. In 2013 they won they went to the finals. In 2014 they won the President's Trophy. 2015 they don't make the playoffs. I don't think they made it in 2016. 2017 lose to the Sens. They won the President's Trophy again in 2020 on that cut short year, which I didn't know. I had to check the standings that year. They won it on aggregate, I guess, because they didn't finish the year, but still a fantastic season. Went to the finals the year before again. So both years they went to the finals in 2013 and 2019. They followed up by winning the President's Trophy. They again then win the that's what 3 President's Trophies in the last decade. 3 finals appearances, 1 cup. Like it's been unbelievable success for one of the most storied franchises in the NHL. But you're right, a drop off should be expected. And the more you look at this list, if you take a look at the expiry section, just contract wise, everyone except for Lindholm, McAvoy, and Pasternak is pretty much up in the next 2 years, at least. So to me, that says it's a team primed to tear it all down and kind of retool on the fly. And I would not be shocked if it happens sooner or later. Some great news. The Sens have their draft pick, probably, or the Red Wings draft pick. So in a way, you're kind of hoping that one of them, like, I don't know, the conditions are crazy on it, but it's something to keep an eye on as a Sens fan. And we mentioned it when they traded for DeBrincat. It's awesome because the Red Wings and the Bruins are both in the division. You get a choice, or you don't get a choice, but you're getting one of those picks at some point. So beating them becomes that much more important for your draft stock, for everything. So I'm really impressed with the way the Sens stack up against them. And my second thing I wanted to hit on after that is last year, let's go over the 4 times these two teams played. This is the Sens last year matched up against the best team in NHL history in the regular season. That can't be understated. They beat them in the home opener. That was a fun game to watch. Beat them again at Christmas in Ottawa in a shootout. Boston was pretty good. I think Cam Talbot dominated that game. Sens win in a shootout. The next 2 games they played were in Boston on the second half of a back-to-back for the Sens, and the Bruins didn't play the day before both times. And I think it was like 3-2 in regulation and 3-1 in regulation for Boston. The Sens match up very well against this team, and they played them very well last year. So a couple things that makes me believe in the Sens core just when they have to face a tall task, beat a good team. It also tells me that head-to-head, even better now. I like the Sens way more than the Bruins just based on what I saw last year. And the Sens probably got a little bit better. Let's say I'll be modest. I think they got a little bit better overall with health and with the moves they made. And the Bruins got worse. I don't think a Bruins fan can argue that. So that's where I stand. And I do think Ottawa's a better team than Boston on paper. So we'll see. I think before Buffalo and Florida, I think this is the most resounding, like Ottawa's a better team on paper. I think the other two are closer than I thought originally. But this would be a team I would not be shocked if they missed the playoffs.
Yeah, and I will say that I still expect them to compete for the playoffs despite being this kind of regressed team, but mainly that's because they still have this goaltending tandem, which was insane, and it's just hard to say they're not going to be good next year, right?
Sorry, they also have a great coach.
Yeah,
Jim Montgomery.
fair.
We should not skip over that. He's a fantastic coach.
Yeah, like I think if any team's going to make it work, it's Boston, just because they've done it for so long now. That it's hard to just be like, no, they're going to suck next year. You can't do that just because they've proven it time and time again. So until they do suck, sort of like how Ottawa, until they are good, like nobody's going to kind of say it just because it's hard to do it. So same thing for Boston. I love your point there too about the draft pick, because the condition, if I'm not mistaken, is that Detroit gets to pick whether they give their own pick or Boston's pick to Ottawa, and that's next year's first. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but if Boston's original trade to Detroit was top 10 protected for 2024,
Oh, yeah.
so if the Bruins, like let's say they're both, or no, if the Bruins are a bottom 10 team this year and have a bottom 10 lottery pick, the Red Wings are obviously going to have to defer that to 2025. So I think then the Red Wings get the choice to either give the Sens their own 2024 pick, depending where it is, or just defer to next year, and then they do the same charade of picking the worst one to give to Ottawa. I think that's how it works. So ideally, next season, if we want a 2024, you want both the Red Wings and the Bruins to be
Mediocre.
from 10 to 15, like
Yeah.
just miss the playoffs kind of, which I think is fair. I think they're both, I don't think they'll be bottom 10 teams, but if they miss the playoffs, they'll be right on that lottery cusp.
Yeah, I don't think Boston will be a bottom 10 team. I mean, you never know. Things can happen quickly, as we know in Ottawa, but I do think that there's a good chance that both Detroit and Boston are like in that 10 to 20 range, where Ottawa could end up with a 15th overall pick, which, there's been a lot of good players picked in that range, you know what I mean? So, I mean, just look at Ottawa's roster. Yeah, I'm immediately thinking Shabbat, Norris, like Caulfield from Montreal. But anyways, like I think Ottawa's in a good spot, and I think that Detroit trade will come back to look better once they do get their pick and know what they're getting. But yeah, like I said with Boston, I mean, we can wrap up on that. But I think it's just Ottawa, to me, I agree with you. I think that they do stack up nicely against Boston, better than they did against Buffalo and Florida that we compared them to. So, I mean, that's kind of the first one where Ottawa's really got the clear edge in my mind. I think their forward group is significantly better. Ironically, though, we did pick Boston's defense, their top four, and their goalies. But I just think that the forward gap is so large here. And I think that Ottawa's potential on defense also, when you add that to the forward core, and then you kind of factor in that Boston is not going to have a 938 save percentage in their net, like it's just not. If that happens again, I'll be blown away. I just don't see it happening again. I think Allmark will still be great next year. I just don't think he's going to be like a historic netminder of a season. So yeah, I mean, I think although we give Boston's lineup the edge in regards to defense and goaltending, I think that Ottawa's potential, and we haven't seen it, but I think if they can even reach 3/4 of their potential this year, they should be able to surpass Boston in the standings. I 100% expect them to pass Boston, and I just mean like on a personal level, I expect them to do it. I'll be disappointed if Boston finishes above them, because on paper, Ottawa's a better team and they have more potential. So that's kind of my take on it, and I hope that Ottawa will kind of match up like they did last year and win, the better part of 4 games that they'll play against them.
Yeah, during training camp, we'll kind of go over their stats from last year against the division, against the West. I think they did really well against Western Conference opponents, but didn't do so well in the East, or maybe it was the opposite. I'm not sure. But yeah, we'll go over all that. Divisional games are going to be so important next year. Kind of like a football season a little bit, where you have to, like, the divisional matchups are going to be massive for the Sens, especially when they're pushing for a playoff spot. So that'll do it. I think that's going to be it for episode 31. It's Brennan's first from Edmonton, so it's a little benchmark for him there. So yeah, we will see you on Monday for episode 32, and we thank everyone for joining. And again, if you have not already, head over to the YouTube page, hit that subscribe button on Apple or Spotify. Leave us a good rating, especially too, because we don't want to forget about the audio. listeners, because that's obviously what podcasting is. So thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you on Monday.